He bought an abandoned ranch with his last dollar. But 3 beautiful sisters were already living inside. He stood at the edge of the dusty road with one small bag in his hand and a folded paper in his pocket. That paper showed the land was his now. It was hard for him to believe, because only a week ago he had nothing left. No savings. No job. No place to go. Every choice he had made in the past seemed to lead him to this moment. Buying an abandoned ranch with his last dollar was not a smart plan. It was a desperate one. The man's name did not matter much anymore. In the city, people had stopped calling him by name a long time ago. He was just another worker who could be replaced easily. He had worked in factories, warehouses, and construction sites. Each job ended the same way. Sometimes the company closed, sometimes he was laid off. Sometimes he quit because the work broke his body faster than it paid his bills. Over time, hope slowly drained out of him, drop by drop. When he first heard about the ranch, he laughed. The price was so low it sounded like a joke. Land that cheap always carried a story, and usually not a good one. People said the ranch was forgotten. Others said it was bad luck. Some claimed nothing ever grew there. But the man had stopped believing in luck, good or bad. To him, the ranch was simply a place that did not ask questions and did not care about his past. The drive there took hours. The road became narrower with every mile. Buildings disappeared. Phone signals faded. Trees grew farther apart, and silence filled the air. By the time he reached the gate, the sun was already sinking low. The wooden sign hung crooked, its paint peeled away by years of sun and wind. The gate itself barely stood, tied together with old wire. He pushed it open slowly, half expecting it to fall apart in his hands. The land stretched out in front of him, dry and uneven. Tall grass covered most of the ground, hiding broken tools and fallen fence posts. A long dirt path led to the house in the distance. The house looked tired, like it had been standing too long without anyone caring for it. Its roof sagged slightly, and one window was missing its glass. For a moment he wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He could have stayed in the city, sleeping in crowded rooms or cheap shelters. At least there were people there. Here, there was nothing but open land and quiet. But he reminded himself that he had already lost everything else. This place could not take more from him than he had already given away. He walked toward the house slowly, his boots crunching against dry dirt and stones. The front door was closed, though the wood looked weak and worn. He pushed gently, and it opened with a long, tired sound. Dust floated in the air, dancing in the light that came through the windows. The smell inside was old, but not rotten. It smelled like wood, earth, and time. The house was mostly empty. A table stood in the center of the main room, missing one leg, held up by stacked books. A chair leaned against the wall. The floor creaked under his weight, but it held. He moved from room to room, checking corners, opening doors. Everything looked abandoned, just as he was told. He sat down on the floor and leaned against the wall. His body felt heavy, not just from the long journey, but from years of carrying disappointment. He closed his eyes and let the quiet sink in. No traffic, no shouting, no machines. Just the sound of wind brushing against the house. That night, he slept on the floor using his jacket as a pillow. It was not comfortable, but he was used to discomfort. What surprised him was how deeply he slept. For the first time in years, his mind did not race. The quiet wrapped around him like a blanket. When morning came, sunlight spilled through the windows. He stood up, stretched his sore back, and stepped outside. The land looked different in daylight. Still rough, still broken, but not as hopeless as it seemed the night before. Birds moved through the sky. Somewhere far away, an animal made a sound. Life existed here, even if it was quiet. He spent the morning walking the land, learning its shape. He imagined fixing the fences, clearing the grass, planting something small. He did not dream big anymore. Big dreams had hurt him before. Small plans felt safer. By afternoon, hunger reminded him that he had very little food left. He returned to the house, thinking about what he could sell or trade in nearby towns. As he stepped inside, something felt different. The air felt warmer than before. He paused. Then he noticed it. The stove, which he was sure had been cold, was warm to the touch. His heart started beating faster. He stood still, listening. The house was quiet, but not empty quiet. It felt lived in. He looked around again. A cup sat on the table, not dusty like the rest. A blanket lay folded neatly in the corner, something he had not noticed the night before. A strange thought crossed his mind. Maybe someone had been here before him and left recently. Or maybe his tired mind was playing tricks on him. He walked slowly toward the back room, each step careful. He stopped when he heard a soft sound. Not loud enough to be clear, but enough to tell him one thing: he was not alone. Fear crept up his spine, cold and sharp. He had come here believing this place was empty, forgotten by the world. He had spent his last dollar on that belief. Now, standing in the middle of the house, he realized his new beginning might already belong to someone else. He did not know yet who was there or why. All he knew was that this ranch, which he thought was abandoned, was holding a secret, and whatever waited behind that silence was about to change everything he thought he knew about starting over. He stood frozen in the middle of the room, listening carefully. The sound came again, very soft, like a foot moving slowly on wood. Turn around, walk out, and never come back. But he had nowhere else to go. This ranch was everything he had left. So instead of running, he took a slow breath and spoke in a calm voice, even though his chest felt tight. "Hello," he said. Only silence, thick and heavy. His eyes moved around the room, noticing details he had missed before. The cup on the table had a little water still inside. The blanket in the corner looked clean, not old or dusty like the rest of the house. Someone had been taking care of these small things. Someone had been living here. He walked slowly toward the back room. Each step made the floor creak, and every sound felt too loud. When he reached the doorway, he stopped. The door was slightly open. Light from a small window spilled onto the floor. He pushed the door gently. Inside the room, 3 figures stood close together. They were 3 sisters. They looked as surprised to see him as he was to see them. The oldest stood in front, her shoulders stiff, her hands clenched. The middle one held onto her arm, eyes wide with fear. The youngest stood slightly behind them, peeking out, her face pale. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Fear hung in the air on both sides. The man raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. "I didn't know anyone was here," he said. "I just bought this place." The words came out rough, not because he was angry, but because he was tired and confused. The oldest sister swallowed hard and nodded. "We didn't know anyone bought it," she replied. Her voice shook, but she stood her ground. "We thought it was still forgotten." It did not look dangerous. They looked tired. Their clothes were simple and worn. Their eyes held the same kind of worry he had seen in the mirror many times before. They sat down slowly, keeping space between them. No one trusted anyone yet, but talking was better than fear. The sisters told their story in pieces, carefully, like people afraid their words could be used against them. They had lived here for months. After their parents passed away, everything fell apart. Relatives promised help, but disappeared. Money ran out. One bad decision followed another until they had nowhere left to go. They found the ranch by accident. It was empty. The house was broken, but it had walls and a roof. They fixed what they could. They stayed quiet. They did not want trouble. They only wanted to stay together. As the man listened, something inside him softened. Their story felt too familiar. Loss, silence, being forgotten. He had felt all of it himself. When they finished speaking, the room went quiet again. The truth sat between them, heavy and uncomfortable. The ranch was legally his now. He knew that. He could tell them to leave. He had the right. But rights felt different when you were looking into the eyes of people who had nothing. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he finally said. "I didn't buy this place to push people out. I bought it because I had nowhere else." The youngest sister spoke then, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't have anywhere else either." That sentence hit him harder than anything else. He stood up and walked to the window, needing space to think. Outside, the land stretched wide and empty. There was room here, more room than one man needed. Still, fear whispered in his mind. How could he trust strangers? How could he share the only thing he owned? What if this ended badly? His life had taught him to expect disappointment, but another thought followed. What if this was not a mistake? What if this was not the end, but something new? He turned back to them. "I don't have money," he said honestly. "I can't promise comfort. This place needs work." "A lot of it." The oldest sister nodded. "We know. We've been fixing it little by little." They talked for hours after that. About rules. About space. About respect. No one smiled much, but the fears slowly eased. They agreed on one thing. For now they would stay. Together, but careful. Watching. Learning. That night, they shared a simple meal. Nothing fancy, just enough to quiet hunger. They sat at the broken table, eating slowly, not sure what to say. The house felt different with voices inside it, less empty, less cold. When it was time to sleep, they stayed in separate rooms. Trust does not grow in one day. It grows in silence, in time, in small moments. Lying on the floor again, the man stared at the ceiling. His life had taken another strange turn. He came here expecting emptiness. Instead, he found people. He did not know yet if this would save him or break him, but for the first time in a long while, his story did not feel finished. Outside, the wind moved through the tall grass. Inside the house, 4 lives rested under the same roof, connected by loss, uncertainty, and a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this abandoned ranch could become something more than a place to hide. Morning arrived slowly, like it was unsure whether it was welcome. Pale light slipped through the cracks in the old walls and rested on the worn floor. The man woke up before anyone else. He lay still for a moment, listening. He heard soft movement from the other rooms, quiet steps, low voices. It reminded him again that he was not alone, and that thought felt both heavy and strange. He sat up and rubbed his face. His body ached, but that was normal. What felt new was the weight in his chest. Responsibility. He had not planned for this. Buying the ranch was supposed to be simple. Empty land. Empty house. Just him and silence. Now there were 3 lives tied to the same roof, and none of them had a clear answer about what came next. He stepped outside to clear his head. The air was cool, carrying the smell of dry soil and grass. The land looked calm, almost peaceful, but he knew calm could hide many problems. He stared at the broken fence line and tried to think like someone who had control over his life. That was difficult. Control was something he had lost long ago. Inside the house, the sisters were awake. They moved quietly, careful not to make noise, as if they still believed they might disappear if they stayed silent enough. The oldest sister kept glancing toward the door, her mind racing. She knew the truth, even if no one said it out loud. This land was his. He could change his mind at any moment. When he came back inside, they all froze for a second. The room felt tight again, like the air itself was unsure. He noticed it, and stopped near the doorway. "We need to talk," he said gently. They sat down, keeping the same distance as before. No one looked angry. No one looked relaxed either. The man took a deep breath. "I don't know how this works," he said honestly. "I don't know the rules. I've never owned anything before." The middle sister nodded slightly, encouraging him to continue. "I won't lie," he said. "I'm scared. I spent everything I had on this place. If something goes wrong, I have nothing to fall back on." The oldest sister finally spoke. "We understand," she said. "We're scared too." Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled in her lap. She explained that every day they woke up expecting to be told to leave. Every sound outside made their hearts race. They lived quietly, not because they wanted to, but because they had learned that being noticed often led to loss. The man listened carefully. He realized something important in that moment. They were not asking for comfort. They were asking for time. Time to breathe, time to plan, time to stay together. The words surprised even him. Saying them out loud made them real. "Not today, but we need to be honest with each other. This place won't survive on fear." The youngest sister looked up at him, her eyes filled with something close to relief. It was not happiness yet, just a small release of pressure. They spent the day talking and working together, not because everything was settled, but because staying busy made the waiting easier. The man fixed a loose board near the door. The sisters cleaned the main room and opened windows to let light and air in. No one joked, no one laughed. But they shared space, and that was a start. Later, as the sun moved higher, a problem appeared. The water pump made a strange sound, then stopped completely. Silence followed. The man knelt beside it, frustration rising. Without water, nothing else mattered. He worked on it for over an hour, but it would not start. Sweat ran down his face, and anger tightened his jaw. This was exactly what he feared. One problem turning into many. The middle sister knelt beside him and watched quietly. After a moment, she pointed to a loose pipe connection he had missed. He tightened it, tried again, and the pump came back to life. Water flowed. It was a small victory, but it changed something between them. The man looked at her and nodded. "Thank you." She smiled softly, just for a second. That smile stayed in his mind longer than he expected. As days passed, tension remained, but it shifted. Fear slowly turned into caution. Caution into routine. They set simple rules, shared chores, clear boundaries. Everyone had their own space. No one crossed lines without asking. Still, at night, doubts returned. The man lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the future. What if this arrangement failed? What if someone got hurt? What if trust turned into regret? His life had taught him that good moments often came before loss. In another room, the oldest sister sat awake as well. She thought about her responsibility. Keeping her sister safe was the only thing that mattered to her. Trusting a stranger felt dangerous. But she also knew something else. Alone, they would not last much longer. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat outside watching the sky change color. The land was quiet. The wind moved gently through the grass. "I used to think being alone meant freedom," the man said suddenly. He had not planned to speak. The words simply came. "Now I think it just meant I had no one to lose." The oldest one looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time not as an owner or a threat, but as a person. "We lost people too," she said. "That's why we're careful." They shared stories that night. Not everything, just enough. Childhood memories. Mistakes. Small dreams that never grew big enough to survive. The past no longer felt like a weapon, it felt like a bridge. But even as trust grew, reality waited. The land needed money. Repairs needed tools, food needed planning. Hope alone would not fix broken walls. The man knew a decision was coming. Sooner or later, he would have to choose between holding on to ownership or building something shared. Both paths carried risk. As he looked at the dark land stretching endlessly ahead, one thought settled deep inside him. This ranch had already taken his last dollar. What it demanded next was something far more difficult. The days began to follow a quiet pattern. Morning light came early, and work started before the sun climbed too high. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood that this routine was important. Routine made life feel stable. Stable meant less fear. Man woke up every day with a list in his head. Fix the fence. Clear the field near the house. Check the roof before the next rain. He had no tools except a few old ones left behind, but he used what he had. His hands grew rougher, his arms tired, but he did not stop. Working made him feel useful again, something he had not felt in a long time. The oldest organized the day, deciding what needed to be done first. She had a natural sense of responsibility, shaped by years of caring for others. Middle sister helped wherever she was needed, quick to notice problems and patient enough to solve them. The youngest stayed close to the house, cleaning, cooking simple meals, and learning small repairs step by step. At first, they worked mostly in silence. Words were careful things, used only when needed. But silence slowly changed its shape. It became less tense, more comfortable. The sound of tools hitting wood, footsteps on dirt, and water flowing through pipes filled the space between them. One afternoon, the man found an old shed behind the house. Its door was nearly hidden by tall grass. When he pulled it open, dust and sunlight rushed out together. Inside were broken chairs, rusted metal, and a few tools that could still be useful. He called the sisters over. For the first time, excitement replaced caution in their faces. They sorted through the shed together, setting aside what could be fixed. It felt like finding treasure, not because the items were valuable, but because they offered possibilities. That night, they used one of the old chairs they had repaired. It still leaned slightly, but it held weight. They laughed softly when it did not break. The sound surprised them all. Laughter did not come easily after loss, but when it appeared, it felt honest. Food was still a problem. Supplies were limited, and the nearest town was far away. The man decided to take small jobs when he could, fixing fences or helping nearby landowners. It was tiring work, but it brought back a little money and, more importantly, contact with the outside world. Each time he left the ranch, worry followed him. Not about the land, but about the people inside it. He did not say this aloud, but he felt responsible now. When he returned at the end of the day and saw smoke rising gently from the chimney, relief settled in his chest. The sisters noticed this change too. They no longer watched him with constant fear. They still stayed careful, but trust was growing in quiet ways. He kept his promises. He respected their space. He listened. One evening, a storm rolled in faster than expected. Wind pushed hard against the house, and rain struck the roof like heavy hands. Water began to leak through a weak corner near the back room. Everyone moved quickly, placing buckets, pushing furniture aside. The oldest sister stood below, holding the ladder steady, her heart pounding. She wanted to tell him to come down to be careful, but she trusted him to know his limits. When the rain finally slowed, the leak was under control. The house smelled of wet wood and earth. They sat together, tired and soaked, but relieved. "That could have been bad," the middle sister said quietly. "But it wasn't," the man replied. Those simple words stayed with them. Over the next weeks, small improvements changed the ranch. Fences stood straighter. The main room felt warmer. The land no longer looked completely abandoned. It still had scars, but now it also had signs of care. One afternoon, the youngest sister planted a small patch of seeds near the house. She did not expect much. The soil was rough and the sun was harsh. Still, she watered them every day. When green shoots appeared, everyone gathered around them. It felt like proof. Proof that effort mattered. Proof that life could grow even in difficult places. Trust deepened not through big promises, but through everyday actions. Sharing tools. Waiting for each other. Saying thank you. Apologizing when words came out wrong. Still, fear did not disappear completely. The man worried about money. Repairs would only get more expensive. Winter would come eventually. He wondered how long this fragile balance could last. The oldest sister worried about something else. She worried that growing close would make future loss harder. She had learned the hard way that nothing stayed forever. One night she spoke to him while the others slept. "You know this can't stay the same forever," she said. He nodded. "I know. But for now," she continued, "this is working." He looked at the dim light of the lamp, then at the walls they had repaired together. "For now is better than nothing," he said. She agreed. As weeks passed, the ranch no longer felt like a shelter of fear. It felt like a shared effort, not a perfect home, but a real one. The man realized something important during that time. Ownership did not come from paper. It came from care, from showing up every day, from choosing not to walk away. The sisters realized something too. Safety did not always come from hiding. Sometimes it came from standing still and letting trust grow slowly. One evening they sat together outside, watching the sky fade into deep blue. The land was quiet again, but this time the silence felt full, not empty. No one knew what the future held. Problems still waited. Hard choices were still coming. But for now, the ranch was alive. The change did not happen all at once. It arrived slowly, in quiet moments that were easy to miss. A repaired fence that stayed standing. A meal that felt warm, not just in the body, but in the heart. A night of sleep without fear. These small things began to add up, shaping a future none of them had planned, but all of them were slowly accepting. The man noticed it one morning when he stepped outside and did not feel the familiar heaviness in his chest. The land looked the same. Dry soil, wide sky, simple house, but something inside him had shifted. He was no longer counting days until failure. He was thinking about tomorrow, and that felt new. Work continued, but it felt different now. It was no longer survival alone. It was purpose. The sisters moved with more confidence. They spoke more freely. The house carried sounds of life again. Soft laughter, footsteps that did not try to hide, voices calling out simple questions. One afternoon, the man returned from town with a small bag of supplies. It wasn't much, but it was enough. When he placed the bag on the table, the youngest sister smiled in a way that made his throat tighten. He realized then how deeply he cared, and that realization scared him more than being alone ever had. Caring meant risk. That evening they sat together and talked about the future. Honestly, this time, not in hopes or dreams, but in real terms. What they needed. What they could do. What they could not promise. "I can't offer comfort," the man said, "but I can offer effort. That's more than we've had." They discussed ways to earn money from the land. Small farming, repairs for neighbors. Selling what little they could grow. Nothing big, nothing fast. Just steady steps forward. As seasons began to shift, the ranch responded. The planted area near the house grew stronger. The fence lines held. The roof stayed dry during rain. Each improvement felt like a shared victory. One day, a neighbor stopped by. It was the first visitor in a long time. He looked surprised to see the place active again. "Didn't think anyone lived here anymore," the neighbor said. The man hesitated, then replied, "We do." That single word carried more meaning than he expected. The sisters heard it too. Something settled in their expressions. It was not ownership. It was belonging. Later that night, the oldest sister stood outside alone, looking at the stars. The man joined her without speaking. Silence had become comfortable between them. "You didn't have to stay," she said quietly. He knew what she meant. "Neither did you." She thought about that, then said, "Maybe this place needed people more than people needed a place." He smiled softly. Time continued its slow work. Problems still came. Tools broke. Money ran low again. Some days felt heavy. But now, no one carried the weight alone. When winter approached, they prepared together. They fixed gaps, stored supplies, planned carefully. Fear still existed, but it no longer ruled them. On a cold evening, they sat inside near a small fire. The house felt full in a way it never had before. The man looked around the room and realized something important. He had not just bought land, he had found connection. The sisters had not just found shelter. They had found stability. The ranch, once forgotten, now held stories again. Not loud ones, not perfect ones, but real ones. Years later, people would look at the place and see a working ranch. They would not know its past. They would not see the fear, the doubt, the risk taken with the last dollar, but the four of them would remember. They would remember the first night of silence, the fear of discovery, the decision to trust when it felt safer not to. The man understood now that his last dollar had not been wasted. It had brought him exactly where he needed to be. Not into comfort, but into meaning. The sisters understood something too. Survival was not just about holding on. Sometimes it was about opening the door. As the fire burned low and the night settled around the house, they sat together, not speaking, not needing to. The ranch was no longer abandoned.